Welcome again to the Hill Duvernay and Associates webcast. Really excited to start the year off because we have two people that we are going to speak with today.
Yes.
And the topic is divorce, the good, the bad, and the ugly. So it is going to be a great conversation. The Q&A section is open for those who are watching live. If you do have a question, feel free to submit that and we will go ahead and get to it. But before we get started, I would like both of you guys to introduce yourselves.
Right. Hi again, everybody. You all know me as Candace Allen Hill Duvernay. I'm the managing partner of Hill Duvernay and Associates, practicing criminal defense, family law, personal injury, and we do some trust and estates as well.
Hi, everyone. I'm Anyama Ferry. I am the managing attorney of Ananda & Associates Attorneys at Law, located in Midtown Atlanta. My main practice areas are family law, personal injury like Attorney Duvernay as well, and I do also handle a lot of landlord-tenant issues and contested real estate matters.
All right. Great. So we are going to kind of jump right into this, and I guess I should introduce myself, Nicole Selena Carter, the moderator. Great to see everyone again. So the first question, actually, I'm going to direct to you, Candace, and it is, what is the difference between contested and uncontested divorce?
Okay, so we get this question all the time. People think, well, I want my divorce to be uncontested because I want the divorce and he doesn't want it either. So, I mean, he wants it too, you know, so we are on the same page. We're not fighting about whether or not we want the divorce. That's not really what uncontested means. Uncontested is when you have agreements on everything, whether it's issues of property, issues of finances, child support, anything that you could possibly deal with as a result of your separation, you're agreeing on. That makes the matter uncontested. Contested is where the exact opposite. You may want this property, I may want the same property, now we're fighting. Or you may want custody, or I want custody of the children. So that's where, that's where it becomes an issue when you all are not on the same page as to what's going to happen as a result of the divorce. The reason Attorney Ferry is here is because with our firm, she handles all of our contested family law matters. So when you come to our firm, we are more than capable of handling your divorce for you. But the first question you'll hear me ask is your matter contested or uncontested? Now, let me say this. With some firms, they will say you better come with every agreement, every I dotted, every T crossed, or it's contested. Our firm doesn't do that. I don't think it's fair. I think that most people, there is some leeway. There may be maybe one or two conversations that need to be had before it becomes a contested matter. So we don't agree completely, but we're not ready to go in front of a judge. I would still label that for our firm's purposes as uncontested.
Okay.
A lot of times what we do with Attorney Ferry is a matter may start off where people really do want to work it out. They've done mediation with my firm, or they try to see if there's any way to come up with an agreement, and then they just absolutely cannot. And then we'll hand the case over to Attorney Ferry, because at that point, I remember one of the the sessions I talked about busting heads. That's what she does.
That's my job.
That's her job. Attorney Ferry / head buster. So
I'm going to have to use that
I
one.
Yeah.
I like
You have to put that on the business card.
Exactly. I'm going to have to add that to my website. That
Right.
means the new tagline.
Exactly. So for all of you all who are wondering, and if you have any questions about whether or not it is, call us and we'll help you determine whether or not it's something that needs to go directly to me, or if it needs to go directly to her, or if we can kind of tag team with it. And that's the purpose of us having a team.
That's great.
Absolutely.
I really like what you said about maybe not every T has to be crossed and I dotted. Like, there is a chance to kind of work through that if you need to.
Yeah, because it's a negotiation process.
Right.
You know, and with the uncontested divorces, it's not just what one person wants, it's what both parties want.
Right.
And, you know, these parties, they're going to be separated, but some of the issues they're going to have to live with for the rest of their lives. So we like to make sure that whatever decision they decide, that it's a decision that both parties are comfortable with and that suits both of their lifestyles and what's to happen in the future.
Right.
So, you know, we like to personalize our services based on our clients. So for each client, we give them personalized service, and that's something we really push through the uncontested divorce.
Right. Can I add one more thing about that, which is something that's big? A lot of times people don't want to go to court, but they want to fight about everything.
Right.
Well, there's really only one way to do this. If you're going to come to a resolution, you're going to come to an agreement, then that's fine. But if you're going to continue to fight, then you're going to have Attorney Ferry go with you to court to have that conversation before the judge and see what the judge says. And I keep saying we all know I can go to court, and I do go to court. However, for family law, she is the head lead counsel for our family law court matters. So,
which is why we had to have both of you today.
yes,
Right.
y'all had a good time
We're gonna
already.
cover
Make
it all.
a great tag team.
Yeah.
I'll tell you that. So.
Good. Well, Anyama, this next one is for you. What's the difference between a divorce and a legal separation? And do you have to file for a legal separation before divorce?
That's a great question. And that's a question that I get a lot. Oftentimes I have potential clients, they'll call my office, and the first thing they say is, well, I don't want a divorce, but I want a legal separation. You can do a legal separation by actually going through the courts and filing a petition with the court stating that you want what is called separate maintenance. That's the fancy word for it legally. Should you do it? Well, the only difference between a legal separation and a divorce are the rights and the benefits. And what I mean by that is, in a divorce, you still have issues to determine, such as custody, visitation, child support, division of property. Those are the same exact issues that need to be determined in a legal separation. The difference would be that when you're legally separated, you still have the benefit to be covered under your spouse health insurance, or maybe it's religious reasons that you decide you want a legal separation as opposed to a divorce. So you're still married, but you're legally separated. In other words, if you file for a legal separation, you're still going to go through the same court process. It's still going to be long. It's still going to be
Filing
issues
fees.
that may be contested, filing fees, exactly. You're still going to see a judge. However, you're not officially divorced. And what's going to happen is, if you decide later on down the road that you meet someone else, you want to start a new relationship, and you want to get married, you can't. What you're going to do is you're going to have to come back and actually go through that same process again and file an actual divorce. So when it comes to the differences between the two, as I mentioned, it's just the benefits. Now, when you file an actual divorce, you're actually divorcing your spouse.
Right.
So again, you separate everything, you determine what happens with child custody, child support, and then you can feel free to remarry. So when deciding whether or not to actually file for legal separation or to get a divorce, you really have to evaluate your circumstances and determine what's best for your family. If let's say you have a certain religion that doesn't provide for a divorce, or you don't want to run afoul of your religious beliefs, then yes, go ahead and file a legal separation. Or let's say you have a particular health condition and health insurance isn't available to you, and you want to remain covered under your spouse's health insurance, then maybe a legal separation would be the best option.
Okay. All right. That was
See why she's on the team? You see why she is on the team? I love it.
All right. So this next question is for you, Candace,
Okay.
which is, and I guess you said, the process you still have to go through a process for legal separation and divorce.
Absolutely.
So in general, then how long does the process take?
That's probably the biggest question that people always ask us. How long is it going to take before I can have my freedom papers, as one of my clients put it?
Right.
I'm not making it up. He really said that. And the answer really is relative to your situation. We have some people who come to me the same day of a consultation and say, hey, look, it's uncontested. We have no kids. We have no property. We want to sign these papers. She's here. She's in the car. Let's get it done. From that date of signing everything, and we will file it with the court, you have to wait 31 days for the court to sign an order. So, and most judges are not going to sign it on that 31st day, just being honest. They have other stuff to do. But sometimes they may sign it on the 32nd, whatever. So at least 31 days after the initial signing and filing, if everything is done by, and I mean, like you've all agreed about the property, the taxes, the debts, or even sometimes people do it with children and child support.
Right.
If they've done everything, 31 days is going to be the smallest amount of time or the shortest amount of time to get it done. Now, she and I have had cases that have gone years. As we said before, people are talking about children. They're talking about property. They're talking about assets, businesses. We've had a lot of people who have started businesses with their spouses. So it may not just be what people see on TV, nasty, angry, not necessarily. It's just a lot of stuff to go through.
And then at the same time, too, you have to take into consideration that the judges have lives, too.
Exactly.
So you have to factor in the judge's schedule with other cases, the court calendar, holidays. There are other factors that go into that. So sometimes that plays a part and how long a case can take.
Right. I will say this though, and this brings up 2 big points. There is at least a 6-month period of discovery. So in these contested divorces, when you're trying to see
Right.
how, and that's, I say at least because some parties can ask the judge for longer. Attorneys may think they need longer. And that's where you're asking for information about your spouse's account. We've all said,
Right.
who is he buying lingerie for? Who is she spending her check on? You know, that kind of stuff. She's laughing, but that's because we
It's
see
true.
it. And so if it's going to be contested, you have to give these parties time to do their discovery and do their digging. Okay? But that doesn't mean you have to wait years for relief. So there are things called temporary orders or temporary hearings. So most counties that we work in require some kind of mediation or something, whether it's court ordered or private, where you can go and do mediation and see if you can work out something on a temporary basis. If you don't work anything out, you can ask the court for a temporary hearing where you would say, Judge, I know we're doing discovery and we have 6 months left, but my child needs child support. Or Judge, I know we have this situation going on, but I really need to see what's going on with my bills. Who's going to be paying these bills for the next year? You can do that through a temporary hearing. We do it all the time, and it's been very helpful for people who don't want to rush the divorce process, but they need to get some relief.
That's good to know.
Yes.
All right. So the next question, we're going to go back to you, Anyama. All right. So it is, can you get an annulment of your marriage instead of a divorce?
Oh, that's good.
That's a good one. That's another one I get all the time. And I explain to people, because I get some phone calls. You know, people call me and they say, you know, I just want to act like it never happened. You know, I just want an annulment. I don't want a divorce. I want an annulment. And I have to explain to them where there are certain bases and grounds for getting an annulment. And for those of you who don't know what an annulment is, the easiest way to explain it to someone who's never heard it before is it's as if your marriage never existed. It basically invalidates the marriage, voids it. If you apply for a job or any future benefit or anything requiring you to state your legal status or your marital status and whether you've been married before, you can say no once you receive an annulment. But in Georgia, there are several different grounds for getting an annulment. And if your situation doesn't meet these grounds, then the way you're going to go has to be a divorce. So one would be, let's say if your spouse was mentally incompetent, because at the end of the day, marriage is a contract. People don't realize it. We don't like to think about it as a contract because it sounds so official and business-minded.
Takes the love out of it.
Exactly. But when it comes to the law, it is a contract. So if one person is mentally incompetent to agree to that contract to marry an individual, that's a grounds to annul the marriage. Another ground is if the spouse is underage. In Georgia, in order to enter a contract, you have to be of adult age, which is 18 years old. So let's say your spouse is 16 years old and you're 21. Well, if your 16-year-old spouse did not get parental consent from their parent to say that you can enter into this contract, and it's just like any other contract where you can't have a minor signing to agree to something. So if that doesn't happen, that's another basis to annul the marriage or invalidate it as if it never happened. The most common ground that most people know as a basis for an annulment is having more than one wife. And we call that bigamy. And if for sure, and it's not having a girlfriend, it's not, oh, well, he was dating someone else, or there was intercourse with someone else, or he cheated on me. That's not a valid basis for an annulment. It's actually your spouse having another legal contract or marital contract with another individual at the time that you enter the marriage. So if there's a bigamous relationship there and you can prove it to the court, not just pure allegations, then you can certainly file for an annulment. Now, one caveat I do want to mention is if there are children involved, let's say the party's married and they've already conceived children, the court will not annul the marriage. The reason being is because in Georgia, the children's best interest is what's of primary concern to the court. And when there's an annulment, remember, we're acting as if the marriage never happened. So if the marriage never happened, then when there's an annulment, you don't get child support, or excuse me, you don't get alimony, there's no division of property, you don't go through any of those issues that you would typically go through in a divorce because the marriage never happened. So if there's a child involved, though, it's against public policy for the court to say, well, the marriage never happened, so we're not going to give this child support.
Right.
So that's why when there's a child involved, even though there may have been a bigamous relationship, even though the person may have been mentally incompetent or forced to enter into the marriage, even though those grounds may be there, once you have children, then at that point you're going to have to go the divorce route.
Okay.
So again, unless you meet some of those bases, other bases quickly would be an incestuous marriage. If you found out that you married your cousin or a brother.
Long lost brother.
Right.
I thought we looked alike.
They do say that when
Yeah.
you get married, the two spouses begin to
Just
look
look
like
alike.
each other.
But in this case,
Right.
there's a reason.
Right. So incestuous marriages, that's another ground for getting an annulment as well. But you can't, it's not as easy as most people think.
I was about to say the movies and the
TV.
magazines and everything make it look like
Right.
it's a pretty simple thing.
Right.
So-
And I know some people, they really want to pretend that never happened, but
Mhm.
unless you have those legal bases and those grounds that I mentioned, then the better route or the only
Only
route
route, yeah.
would be a divorce.
Okay. All right. That was educational.
I love it. People ask that all the time.
They do.
Mhm.
All the time.
Okay, let's see. And I'm going to take a break and see what we have going on. Because we have some questions coming through. All right. So I'm going to read this next question. And Candace, I'm going to direct it towards you.
Okay.
You ready for it?
I don't know, honey. Let's see.
Okay. All right, here we go. So how can I get a divorce if I find him?
Okay.
Their spouse. How can I get a divorce if I
Their
can't
spouse.
spouse?
Okay, I'll say this. This is probably something that's probably best to be answered by Attorney Ferry. I know that there are different ways you can go in terms of doing a divorce by publication,
Mhm. Right.
which is where you have to go on the news and newspaper and say, hey, look, I don't know where you are. This is where I last thought you lived. You last lived off Boulevard.
Mhm.
So I'm going to go to that county of where you last resided and post that for all the world to see and go from there. I've never really had to deal with that.
Okay.
So I do know that that's what you need to do, but I'm sure she's dealt with that. So.
Okay, yes,
Yes.
give us the details.
Yes.
And believe it or not, because I know when some people hear that question, you know, their first mind may be, what do you mean you can't find them?
Right.
But the reality of it is sometimes people actually physically separate, but they never go through the divorce process for their different reasons, whether it's
For
financial
years.
reasons or mentally and emotionally, they're not there yet.
Mhm.
And what ends up happening is the two spouses, they move apart. And a spouse may move out of state. They may be in state and just relocate. Numbers change, addresses change. And if there's a circumstance where a party cannot find the other spouse, then what they have to do is they can still get a divorce. They'll just file it in the county where they reside, as long as they've been a resident here in Georgia or a resident here in Georgia for at least 6 months. They can file it in the county where they live. And yes, they do have to certainly publicize it in the newspaper. But if they're going to go that route, the judge is going to want to know, did you take all the steps that you need to take to locate that person? Did you go on social media? Did you find them on Facebook or Twitter? Did you talk to your in-laws and to find out where they are? Did you, send mail to the old address or to the forwarding address? Did you contact their job? So you're going to have to show that you've done what is called a due diligence, or done your due diligence to actually locate that person. And if you have done that, then what you just need to do is file a sworn affidavit attesting to those steps that you've taken, and actually ask the court, okay, court, I can't find him or her. Can you go ahead and allow me to publicize my petition stating I want a divorce? Can I just publicize it in the newspaper? And if the judge agrees to that and grants it, then yes, you could do that. And then you just have to wait about 60 days for it to run in the newspaper that you want a divorce. And if nobody answers, if he's not reading the paper on that day, then you can file a request to have a hearing and move forward with your divorce.
I have seen judges be a little less inclined to allow that when children are involved.
Absolutely.
When children are involved, judges are very nervous about saying, well, I'm going to give you everything you want about your child and about your property and about everything else about your child, and you just telling me you can't find them. And that's why it's important that you can show that you've done your due diligence, whether it's through, hey, look, this is a string of messages I've sent. This is the text messages I've sent to this number, or, anything like that.
Yeah.
So just be mindful if you have children, it may be a little harder than just getting a judge to say, hey, okay, that's fine.
And that's a good point, because I'm glad you brought that up, because when you do enter into a divorce by publication, there's not going to be any alimony awarded to you, and there's not going to be any child support unless you personally serve that individual. Because if you think about it, to hold someone responsible for child support who may not even have any personal knowledge that they're responsible for that child support, and for the child support to become in default or there are arrears, and to hold that person in contempt, it's not the policy of the court. And just speaking in everyday terms, it just doesn't make sense. And it's almost unfair to the other individual who didn't know about the court order. So that's a good point. I'm glad you mentioned that. If you do file for a divorce and you can't find the other person, the only thing that will be determined is division of property and granting your divorce.
Okay. So it's actually beneficial to go a little bit of the extra mile in terms of investigative work.
Especially if you have children, because we're talking about kids' lives. So if you want to get the financial support and help that you need, then you can do some things like hire a private investigator.
We have a great one.
We do. I actually had him locate somebody in the backwoods of South Georgia. It was amazing. So we have some really good resources to assist us with our cases. Once you decide to hire us. So absolutely, I think maybe the person should invest those monies in hiring a private investigator and going that extra mile.
Okay. All right. I like it. All right. So this next question, I'm just going to put out there, and either one of you can answer it, whoever feels ready for it. So the question is, can I kick my spouse out if he or she doesn't want to leave?
Ooh. Can I answer? Can I answer?
Yeah. Candace.
The answer is no. People say that all the time. Miss Duvernay, he is on his last nerve, or Miss Duvernay, she's really just bothering me. And the answer is the marital residence is just that. You cannot kick your spouse out. You can't change the locks on them. You cannot throw them away and tell them I'm not coming back, unless there are some, and I won't even say unless, because there's still some steps you have to take. If you are in an abusive relationship, whether it's a man or a woman.
That's exactly what I was going to refer to.
Then you will not be required to stay in an abusive home. However, the courts will have to remove the spouse from the home. It will either happen through a TPO, which we often have to do in conjunction with divorces. We have had, one case I can think about with both of us sitting in front of us crying like, I want a divorce, but I don't know what's going to happen when I get home. Well, we had to file a TPO and the divorce in conjunction to make sure, hey, let's get this done.
Which is a temporary protective order.
Exactly. I'm sorry. You saw her face like TPO.
It was coming. I was going to let her finish it, and then I was going to say, all right. And
we're so used to the legal jargon.
Temporary protective order. That's the only way you can get your spouse out of your home. Now, we will never make up anything for you. We will not lie. But if there is a substantiated proof, not even proof with scars or things like that, but if you really have a claim that you've been in an abusive relationship, whether you're a man or a woman, then we will go the extra mile. Now, if they're just getting on your nerves, we can still ask the court for a temporary order. So that's how we go through not the temporary protective order, just a temporary order. And we will still, like we said, have to have a hearing and establish who needs the house more. And Attorney Ferry can go into more of what you would use or what we would use to try to get you the home. But go ahead.
Yeah, absolutely. When it comes to the marital residence, I don't always, and I tell people, I understand he or she may be driving you up the wall. I understand y'all can't stand to be in the same room. But if you're going to make a claim to that residence, meaning in the divorce, you're going to be seeking to have sole possession of that residence, it's very important that you contact Attorney Duvernay's office so that we can actually properly advise you on the best things to do. Because as Attorney Duvernay mentioned, she's very correct. You can't just kick your spouse out, because what's going to happen is, and it's happened in my past cases, your spouse is going to call the police, and the police is going to tell you, ma'am, let your husband, or sir, let your wife back in the residence, because at that point you both have an equal right to stay in the residence. Now, as Attorney Duvernay stated, if you're going to be, or if there is a abusive relationship and there are valid grounds for you to seek a protective order through the court, then the court will at that time make a decision as to who has the marital residence. But what I usually like to recommend to my clients is just try to work things out. Try to talk to one another. You'll be surprised that he may be willing to leave and give you the residence, or she may be willing to leave and give you the residence. But before you decide to leave yourself and just let the other spouse have the residence, certainly consult an attorney, because you may be giving up certain rights, especially in the divorce. You may be giving up certain rights, or you may be giving up your claim to the residence. So absolutely, when there's a house involved, call us before you take any action.
Seen people say, I was so tired, I just left, but I want my house back. But as we said, those divorce proceedings can take a long time. So now you want to move back in a house that you've not lived in for 8 months or a year. And don't get me wrong, we are good at what we do. So we have been successful at getting the house back, but it's a lot harder for us to get you that house if you just called us and say, okay, this is what needs to be done, to make sure that if you're going to make a claim for this later, you can leave now if you want to, but let's do what we need to just to make sure that we can do that.
Right, and like you said, it could take 8 months or a year. So if you willingly leave the marital residence and it's been 12 months, then guess what you've done? You've just abandoned the marriage. And so that might refute any claim that you may try to make to alimony, or I want the house, or I want the furniture that's in the house, but you haven't been there for a year. And under Georgia law, after 12 months is deemed abandonment.
Wow. Okay.
Yeah.
That was a strong tip right there. Okay. We'll be tweeting and posting that one. Make sure you know.
It's so much that people don't realize. And I'll just say this because I know we're almost done, and I know we have a few more questions, but so many people say, well, I could just file myself, or I could just do this myself. You can. But there's so many things, even when you all are agreeing, there's still so many things that you may not know that you're doing. And we have countless people who come to us a year after they filed on their own, or 2 years after they've gone and signed these things really quickly and saying, hey, this doesn't work for us, or I didn't know this, or I didn't know that. And so I'm not saying, of course, we're here marketing our firm, but even beyond that, if you can't afford us, there's Georgia Legal Aid. There are other resources, but don't go to court by yourself, even if it's something like this, because you're talking about things that will affect you way down the line.
Right. I agree.
Definitely. And I can say that. Go back and look at the other webcasts, and you will learn something new every time. And that will tell you right there not to do it alone.
That's so true.
Yeah. Okay, so actually, this is the last question. Then I'll open it up in case you guys have thought of something while we've talked that you just want to share with everyone out there. But this question, I think I'm going to actually direct to you, is what if my spouse and I have been separated for years and I want to move on? So can I start back dating before I officially get a divorce?
I strongly recommend against it. The reason being is because you don't want to take any steps, especially if you know you're going to get a divorce. And whenever I do my consultations and I talk to potential clients, I tell them at this point, you don't want to take any steps that's going to hurt you in your divorce. In other words, remember, the judge is making decisions such as who should get what, who's getting the car, who's getting the house, whether you're going to get any alimony. And you want to come to court with what we call clean hands.
Yes.
You don't want to bring more baggage, to your marriage than you're already dealing with. So I tell people, before you decide to get in another relationship, finish the one you have first. Legally end that one before you decide to move on. And I know we're humans, and it may have been years. I've had people in that circumstance where it's been 5 years since they've seen the other person. But you don't want the other person to come back and say, well, the reason we got a divorce is because she's cheating. She has this relationship going with someone else. So because of her infidelity or his infidelity, then that's why we're getting a divorce. And guess what you're doing? You're stuck now paying all these monies and spending money on legal fees and court costs trying to disprove that. But if you've already moved on, then you're in deep water. So I strongly recommend against it.
Can we give a bonus tip tagging on that? In terms of your alimony claim, if you're trying to get an alimony claim and you have been in an adulterous relationship, guess what you don't get?
Alimony.
No alimony. And so for some people, and I say women because alimony can be given to a woman or a man, but we see more often with women who are trying to move on and they've gotten their sexy back, they've gotten their groove back, but they need some financial help. Well, the courts are very clear. I mean, there's no wiggle room around that. There's some what I call adultery and what somebody else may call adultery may be different.
Right.
What the courts call adultery is you being grown. We have kids watching, but
Yeah.
so just be mindful that in the long run, if you're trying to get not only not look like a bad person, not look like you're sleeping around or things like that, but if you literally want to get alimony, you cannot have anybody else but your spouse.
Right.
And just keep that in mind. So.
And absolutely, that's a really good point. I'm glad you brought that up because the court does look at the parties' conduct throughout the marriage. And as long as you're still legally married, your conduct can be examined even after you all have separated.
Right.
And I can only imagine that nowadays it's kind of easier to examine that conduct.
Oh,
As
yes.
with social media
Facebook,
and that's
Instagram.
that is very true. I would say maybe within the past year, I've seen more and more of my cases where we've had to use social media,
Right.
or the other side brought in social media, and it's always the Facebook posts and the Instagram pictures. So that's a good point, and that's actually a tip that I give to my clients. As soon as they sign that contract, the first thing I say is shut down your social media.
Yeah.
Shut it down, and my page is private.
Nope.
Not on the internet.
Nope.
It's not 100%
Nope.
private. So that's always something that I recommend to my clients.
We could do a whole webcast on social media.
That's a good idea.
That's actually a very good
We need to
idea.
do that. That's
Very
a good idea.
All right, so stay tuned. That one will be coming. We'll announce the date.
I love it. I
Okay,
love
good.
it. Yeah. that'd be cool.
So yeah, that's very helpful. I'm glad we ended on that note. But before we close out, and Candace, before you give the information, do you guys have any closing tips or advice or things you've seen that you want to share?
Good question, because this is an advice that I give people whether they hire my services or not. Whenever I get that phone call, I tell them, look, if you're going to hire me, or even if you go to someone else, or even if you decide to do it alone, whatever the case may be, if you don't retain me, make sure that you get your ducks in a row by preparing now. I tell them, if you know you're going to file a divorce, if you know you're going to separate, go ahead and get everything together now. Get your banking information, get your job information, get his or her job information, because that's going to be important. Know what you want to separate. Take pictures of everything, whether you have to take pictures of all of the belongings in the house. Get your children's information together. Save your text messages. Gather your receipts. Any and everything, and start behaving as if the world is watching you, because they are.
Right.
Your Facebook posts and Twitter and Instagram's posts are being saved. So even if you don't use our services, hopefully you will. Just go ahead and prepare for your case now.
That's very helpful.
I would just say similar, and I would say we've already kind of hit on it in terms of having legal counsel. I just can't stress enough how much things we've had to undo. There's LegalZoom out there. There are, forums on the web. And some people feel like I can't afford a lawyer. Okay, well, you might need to take some time and get the money to afford a lawyer.
That too.
Because in the grand scheme of things, I've just seen how negative it has affected people. And you ultimately end up hiring us anyway.
Yeah.
Because you realize, oh my goodness, I've done this, but now you can't find this, you can't find that, and what's going on with this and what's going on with that. So I would just seriously suggest that you call us, if you got a cousin that's a lawyer, you can't afford it, go to legal aid, but try not to do this alone. The last thing I would say is, I know this is not a light topic. We knew that when we did it. We were like, starting the year off with divorce, really? But at the same time, so many people this is the reality of life. Just like we do car accident cases, just like we deal with wills, just like we deal with anything. So you've got a team right here that's willing to help you take that burden off your shoulders, So I just wanted to share that with you guys.
Okay. So it's called Divorce, the Good, the Bad, and the Ugly. And you just gave the good, which is you got a team that can help take the burden off your shoulders.
Right, exactly. I love
fit
it.
that in there.
Yes,
Sorry.
there is the good. That is the good.
All right. So, if you want to contact this team for help,
Yes.
Candace, if you can give us your contact info.
Yes, 770-692-8481 is my number. I know I always put that out there, and it may change tomorrow, but for right now, call me there. No, it's not going to change. It won't change tomorrow. But also, my website, that will not change, is www.hill, Hill, Duvernay, D-U, V as in Victor, ERNAY.com. And you can, like I said, log on. You'll see more about Attorney Ferry's profile. You'll call me. We'll get it all done and go from there. And it'll be good.
And before we end, I just want to say thank you so much
Yes,
for having me as a
of
guest.
course.
This is fun, actually.
It is.
and,
It's a lot of fun.
Yeah, and I look forward to doing future
Yes,
webcasts with you all. But I
definitely.
truly enjoyed it, so thank you so much.
Oh, you're welcome. Yes.
Yay, Attorney Duvernay, Attorney Ferry, thank you
Yes.
so much. And we will be following up with the social media ones.
Yes.
Right.
So, but for those of you who don't know, these webcasts are done once a month, and you can go to the YouTube channel Hill Duvernay and Associates to view those after they have taken place because they are uploaded. So thanks again and have a great evening.
Good night,
Thank you.
everybody.
Good
Thank
night.
you.